Great. Thank you, Zoe, for turning the recording on. And for those of us watching this after the event, either those who are joining us sort of in an interactive offline version or just seeing it on our YouTube channel, this is the second session of the First Aid for Feelings Manual book club. And we're just starting by arriving in the session. So we've had some problems with the Zoom link. So we've got a couple of people trying to get in. So we've had a bit of a bumpy start to our session today. So it can be helpful to check in again, like we did at the start earlier, just checking in with shoulders, sitting bones, maybe just twiddling your toes a little bit. We often forget that there's this whole body, we're just not just sort of this disembodied brains. So twiddling your toes is a way of sending a signal down to your toes and back up to your brain, just to remind your brain of that. We will do the sort of housekeeping and observations. We will run through again how to do book club. Quite a few of you liked that slide last week, and just to be reminded of that. And then we'll go into the thick of it, which is the kind of the First Aid for Feelings technique, the APC technique, and then the why that's all happening, how your brain is working, and why that affects your ability to think. And then we'll do observations and next steps. So then in terms of housekeeping, so the 3 sections of 20 minutes is slightly wobbly today because we're kind of tacking and jabbing with the winds and currents and the tech issues we're having. But it's roughly that kind of teaching part, the practice part, which is in the breakout rooms, which is not recorded, and the Q&A at the end, which is also not recorded. And that's done to kind of safeguard that feeling of feeling safe and being able to share freely and knowing that it's not going to be sort of shared outside of this group. Your mics are muted, and we will invite you to unmute when that becomes relevant. Nikki is on it in terms of the chat, so questions or hellos or anything you want to put in the chat, we really welcome that. And also, if there are questions that you can think of that we can look at in the Q&A later, then Nikki will be gathering those questions for us. Yeah, and so then there's a note on the recording for the people who are not able to attend, and some of you are able to attend some of them, but not all of them. So this recording mechanism is for sort of a few different kinds of people who are attending or people who are attending just through the recordings, and then those who are seeing this after the event. And then as always, for those of you who have gone for the added option of one-to-one support, remember that you've got email support and the tune-ups in between our book club sessions. So then observations. So now that we're in the second session, we don't need the same level of observations that we did in the first one. So we've simplified it, but also this is in response to your feedback last week. So that was really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. So we're now just doing 3 questions, and we also sent you an email earlier today where you can, where you may have seen those questions already. They're for you to reflect on. If you want, you can then email them back to me so I can get a sense of where you're at. Or if it doesn't feel helpful to you to share it, I invite you to reflect on that for yourself, just to get a sense of what am I noticing? Am I able to be more curious and kind to myself? Am I doing anything differently? Like Becca was saying, just noticing and changing her posture to ease and open up that breathing a bit more. So we're not going to pause for recording and for this now or anything like that. This is just something for you to bear in mind. And you can come back to the email that we sent earlier today. And then now we start the kind of teaching part. So part of the thing we are teaching is actually how to do book club, how to do anything. So that reminder that this is not a test. There's not we won't put you on the spot at the end and ask you to list all the different questions of the feelings profile or all the different components of the feeling chart. This is for your benefit. And like somebody really liked the comment that this is not community service. You have signed up for this voluntarily. So really recognizing that this is kind of like a gift to yourself and your self-care to come and carve out this space, not just time space, but also your emotional and kind of physical and head space and heart space. The why bother, to check in with that again. And then that kind of checking in with, have you been able to read the manual? And then how can you take that learning forward to next week? And we'll check in with that again at the end of today's session. And then remember that kind of Frank Sinatra and do it your way. There really isn't a right way or a wrong way to do book club. And notice that this is part of the teaching section, because it's that the way you do book club is also about doing it more from a place of trust rather than possibly from a state of anxiety or fear. And we'll be talking about that a bit more further in or later on in the book club. So the key focus of today, yes, I can see some people taking a breath in as we get just that visual prompt to breath and body. So the ABC technique is inspired by the ABC for medical first aid, which is airways, breathing, and circulation. It really is that rapid response, that first call, that first tool in the kitty that you use. And it starts with awareness. Because before we're aware, we can't change anything. If I'm not aware that I'm frustrated, there's nothing I can do about it. And I often use the example quite some years ago when I was developing this stuff. I lived in a place called Ely, where the train station is very close to the supermarket. So I had to really be mindful that if I was going to go to the train station, that I didn't pull off one exit too soon to go into the supermarket, because it was so easy. I went more frequently to the supermarket, so my autopilot was to go to the supermarket. And sometimes I didn't realize until I was actually parked up that I didn't want to go to the supermarket. I actually wanted to take the next exit on the roundabout and go to the train station. And I think that we can't make a different choice until we realize there's something going on that is not helpful. And so the awareness is a real key here. And therefore, the comments we were talking about earlier before we started the recording, the indicator of frustration is a really helpful indicator that there is something here to become aware of. And you wouldn't be able to become aware of it until you got the feeling letting you know that there was something going on. It's a bit like the sat nav going like, course correct, or please turn around. It's that letting you know that there is something that is not okay for you. And so at that point, it's like, I am struggling. And it doesn't have to be you don't have to be able to identify, I'm feeling this feeling. It's just like, I am struggling, I am suffering, I'm having a hard time. There's something going on. And then you've got the A of the awareness. The second part is then the breath and body. So the breath is there because breathing is always in real time. You cannot stash away some breath for next week, and you certainly can't catch up a breath from last week. So breathing is always, you only take one breath at a time, and one breath follows the other. So it's a very sort of shorthand, simple tool to get yourself back into the present moment, because it's likely that whatever it is that you were struggling with has some connection to either the past or the future. The other reason why breath is there as the sort of first port of call after awareness is that through your breathing, you're actually or when you sort of work with your breath, you're manipulating your biochemistry. You're changing the ratio between oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body. And we'll be talking about that a bit later on, why that matters in terms of which part of your brain you're able to access. For now, just recognizing that actually, like, remember in movies in the old days when they would breathe into a paper bag? Don't know if anybody remember those days. They stopped doing that. Health and safety. You can't really do that in movies anymore. But yeah, so that was to actually, so you'd be inhaling the air that you've just exhaled, which was full of carbon dioxide. So it's to rebalance, recalibrate that ratio in your body, which actually soothes the body, just takes the edge off that feeling. The second part is then not just the breath, it's the body itself. So just like Becca said at the beginning, before we turned the recording on, that when we sit down or when we hunch our shoulders forward, our lungs collapse a little bit. They haven't got as much space. So we can't breathe as freely. And that as well can cause contraction and make us or amplify that feeling of suffering. So when we do something different with our body, we actually change, we support that change in the biochemistry. So the change can be standing up, it can be sitting down, it can be walking up and down some stairs, it could even be lying down, it could be twiddling your toes, it could be lots of things, but the main thing is that you do something different with your body. And then the third one is the choice. So you can see that on the graphic that we've got there, we've got X, Y, and Z. Yeah, because when you've done your breath and body, we'll do it together in a minute, you then come to the place of choice. And then you can have a look at actually, what am I aware of? What is going on? Is what's going on helpful? And often, like, for example, if you're frustrated, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to continue what you're doing. So then it could be helpful to start to look at, well, what might be more helpful? What could be the X, Y, Z options for me in this situation? So we'll be talking about that in a bit more detail, but that's the kind of overview of the technique. First, become aware, then come to your breath, and then to your body. And then once you've done that step, you go through to see which is the choice. So you start to look at what might be more helpful in this situation. So any questions, do put them in the chat so Nikki can keep tabs on that. But what I want them to do next is actually specify and zoom in on the breath and body. So I'd like to take us through a couple of breathing exercises, just to give you a sense of, well, how can I do this breath part of this technique? If you've got asthma, you've got any breathing issues, just check in with your lungs, check in with your body, see what feels helpful or comfortable, and go with that. I'm going to teach you two different techniques. One is called 5-7 breathing, and the other one is called the 4x4 breathing. So the first one is we breathe into the count of 5, breathe out to the count of 7, and we'll do that 3 times together. And the second one, the 4x4, is when we breathe into the count of 4, we hold the breath to the count of 4, we breathe out to the count of 4, and then we hold the breath again to the count of 4. And we'll do that 4 times to give you a sense of those two different techniques. Right, so let's do this together. Just settle yourself in whatever way feels okay, and then I'm going to count us in. Yeah. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then giving your lungs a bit of a bumper space in between. We'll do the second breath, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And again, just a bit of bumper space in between for your lungs to adjust. And then the third and final time, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then you may find that you want to do a really big breath after this, or a few little breaths. So really allow your lungs to take the lead, do what the lungs want to do, what they want to do. And then any stretching or moving that you want to do, just allowing your body to do that. So just notice what it felt like to just do that. It's only there's one of the 3, 5, 7. We're then going to experiment with the 4x4. And because it's holding your breath to the count of 4, if you've got any long restrictions, obviously just do it as much as feels okay for you. So this one has got a slightly different purpose. It might give you a slightly different sensation. And again, it's just about being curious about what it feels like. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And then a breath in between, just a bit of bumper space. Then the second time, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Bit of space in between. And the third time, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And then releasing. Yeah, bit of space. And then the fourth and final time, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And then release. And like with the 3, 5, 7, just allowing your lungs to do whatever they need to do. Short breaths, little breaths, normal breaths, puffing, sighing, burping, whatever you feel like feels helpful for your body to do, just allow it to do that. Yeah. And then you might just want to just move your fingers a little bit and your toes a little bit. And then, yeah. And then something that I call the central nervous system stroking, but could also be the hackles. So if any of you have got cats and dogs or bunnies, when they are stressed, you may notice that their hackles go up. Yeah. And so you stroke them from the head to the tail. I imagine that's what I do with my dogs. Yeah. So there's a human version of this, where we stroke from the shoulders down to the fingertips on one side and then the other. And if you can, just maybe from your hips down to your thighs or down to your knees. It's just like imagining those little nerve endings just under your skin. They're all kind of like, because you've been frustrated about something. So we just want to, yeah, stroke that down. Yeah. Right. So now I imagine you're feeling a little bit soothed, a little bit more chilled. You may even feel a slight temperature change. Just notice whatever sensations are going on. And then also you've got like, oh, what choices might be possible at this point? So I want to take you through to the next slide. Yeah, because I want to show you where you might have been coming from. Yeah, so now you've chilled a bit. We want to reflect back. Actually, what was I doing? What was the awareness part here? And I wonder if any of you were what's called crocodiling, or what I call crocodiling, actually. It's not, you don't find it in the Oxford Dictionary. That's something that I've made up. Crocodiling is basically when you're reacting from the most primal part of your brain, which we'll show you again in the next slide. And that at this point, you've not got access to the part of your brain that can access empathy or helpful choices. So if you think back to the awareness part, the kind of the thing, the frustration or the thing that's made you kind of go, okay, I'm struggling or suffering some way. It can be helpful to check, was I crocodiling? Was I reacting from a kind of a primal, almost like a knee-jerk reaction, rather than was I responding thoughtfully, mindfully, in a considered way? So you're operating for the part of your brain that is often referred to as the reptilian part of the brain. So reptilians are crocodiles, hence crocodiling here, which then takes me on to the next slide. So one of my favorite brain scientists, Dr. Professor Linden, he has got this very basic model of the brain. So basically the cone is the part of your brain, is the part that's below the neck. So basically the rest of your body. And the three scoops are the stuff inside your skull. And the bottom part is like, it sits like in the cone. It's so old, it's really kind of, it's called the cerebellum, and the bottom part of that reptilian part of the brain. It's closest to this brain stem, that kind of back of your head that goes down into your spine and the rest of your body. This is the part of your brain that does all the reaction, that kind of, if a car comes quickly past you, jump back on the pavement. Or, you know, it's the part that if there's a fire, you respond really quickly. This is also the part that does like sex drive, I'm hungry, I'm tired. All of those kind of very basic functions come from this part of the brain. Heart rate, breathing, all of that kind of stuff is happening in here. It's so basic that, no, that's not quite true. It's so primal, there's more of a reflective word. It's so primal that it's not a metaphor, we call it the crocodile scoop. We literally share it. The brain structures in this part, or the neural structure in this part of the brain, are the same that you will find in crocodiles. So that's not a metaphor. So like, for example, when you're really hungry and anybody gets between you and the fridge and you go, "Arr," this is the part of your brain that's responding. Yeah, it's not your top scoop. So let's then move up. So the next scoop from the crocodile is the group scoop. It's the us and them. It's the part of your brain that's called the limbic system, or the mammalian part of the brain. It's where we have social intelligence. We have kind of access to our empathy. We can sort of get a sense of a group dynamic. We have a sense of group rules, you know, the do's and don'ts in our society or in our family or our tribe. And it's that kind of sense of belonging and connectedness that really sits in this part of the brain. And then we've got the top scoop, which is the kind of behind the forehead, that kind of wriggly stuff, the cortical brain. And the top scoop is the part of the brain that can think about thinking. The part of the brain that can troubleshoot getting into a Zoom call, or that can troubleshoot fixing the video recording that took me 3 days to figure out. And I was so proud of myself when I figured it out this morning. I was able to send you the link to that recording. And I've definitely done a few ABCs to get me to that point, because I had to certainly work with my own crocodile response there. So that top scoop is the rational part of our brain. So if you think about it, we've got the kind of crocodile scoop at the bottom, the group scoop in the middle, and the top scoop can think through maths and Zoom and council tax and whatever, or at least for some of us. So see what I've done there in terms of the sentences that come with each scoop. So in the top scoop, we can see the bigger picture. We're all in this together. We can see how we're all interconnected, the shared humanity. We can be really generous. We can be very kind. And most of us are, you know. But then when the stress intensity comes up, we feel under any kind of threat. You can see on the right-hand side, the ability to think comes down. Yeah. The brain, the body and the brain are having to prioritize resources. And when we're under threat or perceived threat, the decision is made, or the programming is such that we unplug, or we take that top scoop offline. And if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, the logic is sound. Because if we're faced with a tiger that's going to eat us or, you know, attack us, it doesn't serve us to have the ability to think through whether that tiger had breakfast, or, you know, whether that tiger had been loved by their mother, or, you know, whether they were suffering from any psychological childhood issues. In that moment, that cognitive function isn't valuable. So the body goes, I'm just going to take that part of my resources offline. It's like a hospital closing a ward. It's like, we don't need that right now. We haven't got the money. We haven't got the energy to drive that thinking, because we're doing all the breathing, the fighting, the running away, the muscle groups, all of those things that kick in the stress response. So we then lose our ability to see the bigger picture, and we go into this tribal thinking of us and them. And we're seeing a lot of that because there's, you know, in war zones or in situations where we're feeling, you know, under threat, we go into the other party is the baddie, and we are, you know, we have to stick together against the other group. We really go into that very tribal, very sort of discriminatory thinking. And interestingly, if we then increase the stress levels even more, the body unplugs that scoop as well. And we go into its me versus everyone else. So this is the time when you can be really snipey with your partner, or you say really awful things to your children or your parents or your best friend. And then like 3 hours later, you're like, I can't believe I was so horrible. Yeah. That's because whatever that was coming from the crocodile scoop, not your top scoop. So I really want to emphasize just how biochemical this is. So even after years of therapy and self-work, like for example, with the recording, getting those technical issues sorted, I was crocodiling here on Monday morning, and I had to do my ABC, I had to do my breathing, get my top scoop back online. And then it took me till this morning to figure out and troubleshoot what the issue was so I could send it out to you. So this biology is very hardwired. And it's because the biology is wired to assume that everything is a threat first. So I often talk about sort of the cats, dogs, wolves, and tigers as a sort of a model for levels of risk. You know, a cat is a lot less risk than a tiger. Yeah. But if your brain and my brain, if we were wired to assume everything was a cat and then reevaluate from there, we would be dead by the time we realize that this wasn't a cat, this is a tiger. So there is a logic for why the brain starts by taking everything offline, apart from just like, can I punch you? And downgrades the risks from there. So when you start to look at your thoughts, you start to look at your feelings, you start to look at your behavior, what we can often do is start to see all the things where we are unskillful. It's like, oh no, I didn't do that very well. Or, oh, I was lashing out there. Or, oh, I just ran away from that person instead of actually engaging in a conversation. I really, really, really want you to remember how biochemical that is. Doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, it doesn't make you a good person either. It just makes you a human. And to really give yourself that kindness, to remind yourself that this is your biochemistry working. And that through the training and the things that you're learning through the manual in this book club, you can rewire some of that training, absolutely. But there is still that very core element of that survival instinct, which is really powerful and really strong. So again, any questions, any thoughts, any observations, please put that in the chat so we can then care for that when we come to the Q&A at the end. And then let's get curious. So we're about to come to the end of the recorded part. We're going to go into the breakout rooms. But what I want you to get curious about is that how do you become aware that you are crocodiling? So let's think back to the last time you were snappy or frustrated or irritated. It doesn't have to be that you blew the house down, but just like, when did you last have that sense of feeling, either in being sort of maybe aggressive or passive aggressive to somebody, or in the fact that you just ran away. You just, you just sort of went to the flight aspect of the stress response rather than being present. And then which of those breath and body exercises felt helpful to do? Did it feel helpful to do in the 5-7 breathing or the 4x4 breathing? Did you like the stroking down? Did you like the twiddling fingers and toes? Just kind of get curious about those kind of aspects. And then once you've calmed the system down, once you've got a bit more access to your top scoop again, what might be a more helpful choice in whatever that situation was that you were thinking about? So Zoe, we're about to come to the end. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to stop the recording. So for those of you who are watching this on recording, if you're part of the book club, we are an email contact. So as we said in the email, do email me your replies. If you're watching this after the event, take a moment to just note these things down, get curious, be kind, and kind of maybe refer to the book if you've got it to get a sense of actually how can you do this for yourself in this moment. So thank you for that, Zoe. So if you could stop the recording now.